cried. I don't think he knew that, but because it was so resonant with what I had just experienced in my own near-death experience in the spring of '95. So it was after that, and I thought, wow, it really spoke to me, and it's kind of hung over a lot of the things that I've done ever since, because I knew that feeling of just. I stood there after my experience and I said, there's absolutely nothing I wouldn't do for that white light. There's nothing. And that's been the guiding force of my life ever since. And this is what he was saying. And I said, wow, brother, I know what you're saying. And I never heard at that point, heard anybody talk like that. And it was so moving to me personally. And I just really appreciated that. I kind of have seen him as a god ever since. I get kind of shy around you, I have to tell you. But in any case, I'm just thrilled that he agreed to be a part of this and to share our experience. My mission is to help people lose their fear of death. And it comes with capital P and the word passion. Big follower, get out of my way. I'm trying to do whatever I get told to do. And a lot of times I don't know what that is either. Anyway, so we are very grateful to have him here today with us. And I hope you all will enjoy it as much as I have enjoyed knowing him. So give a warm welcome for Reverend Ed, please.
Well, good afternoon. It's such a privilege to be here, and one of the things I've learned along the way is that there truly are no accidents in spirit, and I've been asked several times, and the schedules just never worked out, and this time it did. And as I listened to you all share earlier, I realized that the timing is perfect, and I guess if I'm here to say anything in particular, it's that we have a great work to do. And it's time to do it. In order to get there, though, I have to go back to where I was. The other unique thing about this afternoon is that I have spoken in passing and alluded to my near-death experience, but I have never addressed it head on. Not even with anyone individually that I can think of. It's just been a very personal thing. And everything that has flowed from it has been a very personal thing. And so it's a privilege and a bit of a fright to have this opportunity to share it in a very forthright way. In order to talk about what happened, you have to understand where I was when it happened. And it wasn't a pretty picture. At the time. It was 1974, so it was 28 years ago last October. And I had been born in a small steel town in western Pennsylvania, raised in a large family, oldest of 8 kids, poor family. My father was a steel worker. My mother later on became a nurse. Lived a very strange childhood. I don't think I was as abused as I abused myself. Just feeling I didn't belong. I just remember day after day after day, spending every day in varying levels of fear. Feeling I didn't belong, I don't know who these people are or why I'm supposed to care about them. Escaped into movies and books and loved stories of changelings. Switched at birth. That was the only answer that made sense to me. So I just kept thinking some big important something is going to come along on a horse or a car or something and carry me somewhere where I really belong. And that never quite happened. I was very shy, introverted, very bright, and not athletic, all of which in western Pennsylvania steel town is destined to keep you unpopular and ignored, and I was for a long time. And then something happened in my junior year of high school, and that's another story altogether, I don't want to go there, but the result was that I suddenly became extremely popular. I was one of the in crowd. There were like 7 of us guys, then 6 football players and me, go figure, you know. But what made the difference was that I started drinking. And all of a sudden, life worked. Well, geez, you know, why didn't somebody tell me this before? I didn't know it could be so much fun and so easy, and I didn't know I could be so damn witty, you know, and clever, and say all these wonderful things, and do these outrageous things. And so off I went to college. I went to Princeton in New Jersey. And their assumption there at that time, I think they've become a little stricter since, but their assumption was that you are young adults and you can pretty well take care of yourselves, which was probably true for most of my class and not true for me. And things went from bad to worse very quickly, and I became a full-blown alcoholic. I mean, they used to talk in the 12-step programs about crossing an invisible line, you know, and I think my invisible line was like the second beer I ever had in my life. You know, I think I had maybe 2 beers worth of social drinking, and the rest of it was straight downhill. It made life hell. Blackouts were a very common thing, and being gay without even knowing yourself that you are gay in an all-male campus, because Princeton was then, going into blackouts and not knowing what you've done when you wake up the next morning does not make for a comfortable and happy life, I want to tell you. I moved to New York. I was very involved in theater. Worked for Joe Papp at the New York Shakespeare Festival. Got involved with my first serious relationship with one of the most brilliant actors that I think America has ever produced, an actor that other actors would stampede to see wherever he worked, and a raging alcoholic who eventually died at age 37. He helped me. I've come to appreciate since then that he was very helpful, because he greased the slope, you know. If it weren't for Robert, I might still be out there in the twilight zone of half sober and half not, and half alive and half dead, because that's the kind of life you're living when you really give in to your disease. And he got me there faster than anyone else could have done. And this, I mean, it's a long, long story, and it's not the part of it I want to dwell on. But it culminated in October of '74. By this time, we were living on Long Island in his family home. His mother was there. She was dying of cancer and had nurses round the clock and wanted us there to do the things the nurses couldn't do, to do groceries. His father had died the year before, and he was an only child. So we were there. And he was of no use. I mean, he was, one of the joys of that relationship was that he was much more obviously an alcoholic than I. He would get really sloppy drunk very easily. And I always looked like the good Christian martyr that was, you know, putting up with this and helping him home. And nobody ever knew that we got home, he passed out, and I kept drinking until hours later, being careful to hide the bottle before I passed out, so that if he came to before I did, he wouldn't find the bottle. It was a rich and full and rewarding life. And it was the only life I knew. I was pretty unemployable. I was not, my health was shot. And I was just in a state of total and constant despair. His mother died, and so we got through all of that, and then of course the nurses weren't there anymore, and we were still there, and it just seemed like there was nothing I could do to pull myself out of that abyss. But drink and do drugs. One night, that October, a nurse who had taken care of his mother came by. She hadn't been there for 6 months, but she was worried about us, and she just came by to see how we were doing. I was too weak to get out of bed, and none of that seemed to surprise me. You know, I just thought, it's old age. You know, I was 28. It's what happens when you turn 30. I mean, I don't know. I didn't care. I was in constant pain. I was constantly depressed. I really wanted to die. Didn't have the guts to really do that. Had been in and out of several mental hospitals along the way. I mean, the journey was dramatic, and I would go through, nobody ever said, you're an alcoholic, you need to stop drinking. They all said, well, just live your life normally. And, so they would release me, and that would last for about, 3 or 4 hours. And then the pattern would start over again. And I had no reason to believe that that pattern was ever going to be broken. I just felt that I was a total failure. I had really totally screwed up my life, and I didn't much care about what was going on, and there was certainly no future ahead that I was looking forward to with any interest at all. The nurse took one look at me and called an ambulance. And I was taken to the closest nearby hospital. It was a Friday night. They were busy, and they turned me away. They didn't have the room in the emergency room, and it was clear that I was not going to live anyway, so they just didn't want to be bothered. So I vaguely remember, what's amazing is how clear most of this is, how vividly clear, and that's not because I have made a point of it, because I ignored it for many years afterward. It's because I'm supposed to remember every bit of it, and it comes back to me in vivid color and specificity whenever I turn to think of it. I remember being raced across Nassau County to Nassau County Hospital with the sirens blaring, and with the attendant saying, I don't think he's going to make it. I got to the hospital. They put me in the emergency room. A doctor came by, and I remember him saying, he's not going to make it, and he literally filled out my death certificate and signed it. And left it on my chest and said, put in the time when he goes,
Is this an HMO?
Well, I mean, I wasn't the most appealing of candidates, I'm sure, and since he was deciding that his job was to save the living, not to help the dying, and so there's no blame involved. What came out of that was very interesting was, because I can remember, I remember the conversations of the nurses over me and the doctor talking to the nurses. I remember and I was, as far as they knew, I was in a coma. When I did come back, to their total surprise and shock, a week later, I said, you really should be careful what you say over the patient. And they said, we didn't say anything you could hear. You were in a coma. And I was able to repeat word for word the conversations they had given me. It just blew them away. I hope it made a difference. No, it scared the hell out of them. That was fun. Where was I? Well, by this time, please remember, I have never tried to spiritualize this experience. I have never tried to make it scientific. I've never tried to particularly understand it or put it in any context. It is what happened to me. I was not in my body. I was above my body. I was in the corner of the room, looking down and realizing that all the pain and all the depression and all the sorrow were in the body. And I was free. And I turned, and there was a light that seemed worth following. So I followed it. This was 74, so these experiences were not common. The books had not been published yet, and I wasn't fulfilling any expectations that I had planted in my own mind. This is simply what happened. The feeling I had, and none of this surprised me at the time. I just wasn't surprised. I was just bemused by the whole thing. I felt very certain that I was on something like a flying saucer, suspended. I was above the earth. I was apart from the earth, but I wasn't there yet. I wasn't at the light. I wasn't where I was to go. And suddenly I became aware of a number, there were 4 or 5 beings around me. I can't tell you what they looked like. I have images of colors, but nothing more specific than that. The funny thing I remember is that I was very annoyed because they were coming toward me from everywhere. They were coming, there was no up and down. They were coming from down there, and I thought that's really unfair. I need to have I had no point of orientation here. I'm very, if you're, And what they said was, and one of them was the spokesperson, and there wasn't a lot of, it wasn't a warm, fuzzy experience. In years since, I've come to realize that that was deliberate. That was the way, sometimes we don't pet the animals because we don't want them to get accustomed to being fed and nurtured. We want them to be able to exist on their own. And I'm very aware that they did not want me to be all that comfortable in this experience because their message was, you have to go back. And my message was, not on your life. I'm not going back. What's remarkable when I look back on it is how much I knew in the experience that I did not know in conscious life. Because what I said to them was, I will go back in another life, but I ruined this one, and I can't make it work. And they said, this being said, we need you back in this one. You have a work that you committed to do, and no one else can do it, and it needs to be done. And I said, I can't. It hurts too much. There's too much pain. I just can't, just don't ask me to do that. And he said, why don't you rest here for a while, and we'll talk later. So they took me to this place, and I lay down on this. Now, on the earth plane, while all of this is going on, I am in a deep coma, and they're still waiting for me to die any minute. And this went on for days. I had no idea of time, but it went on for days. I remember that I felt rested, and that the one being came back alone this time, and he said, it's really important that you go back, and we will make you this promise. If you will go back, and I had a choice. They always honored that I had a choice. If you will go back, we promise you it will never be that bad again. And I thought for a while, and I said, okay, I'll go back. And I did. I came back into my body, came out of the experience as if very little had happened. And I just shocked the nurses and doctors. They didn't know what to make of me. And they said to me, like 4 or 5 days later, and what was wrong with me? What was causing this? Well, it was a laundry list of everything that can go wrong when you substitute alcohol and dope for any other kind of nourishment. I was anemic. I was producing no white blood cells. I had my spleen was damaged. On and on and on. And after about a week after I came back, the doctors came in and they said, you truly are a miracle. There is nothing wrong with you now. You have sustained no physical damage. And if you just stay away from alcohol, you will be fine. And something in me, over which I felt like I had no control, said, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that. Because I know what will happen. I will go back into this relationship, and I will go back into the cycle will start again. The cycle has always started again. I have no reason to believe it won't start again this time. So he said, well, there is an alcohol treatment center here. It's a 12-day program. You really don't qualify because it's usually for people who are detoxing from their last drink, and you've been here in the hospital for 3 weeks. You haven't had a drink. I said, no one's offered. If anyone had come around offering, I would. So he pulled some strings and got me into the program because he really got that I was being as honest as I could conceivably be in that moment and saying, I have no idea how to do this. So I went into the detox program and immediately wrapped all my arrogance around me. I would not say the Lord's Prayer. I don't believe in that nonsense. I would not say my name. I would not say I'm an alcoholic. I would not go to these meetings. I remember once there was a Friday night 12-step group. There's a 12-step group meeting twice a day, every day. But one Friday night, these two really sweet people came out from who knows where on Long Island to share with us. And I remember in my infinite wisdom saying, so you're telling me that you represent sobriety to me and you have nothing better to do on a Friday night than come out and talk to us. I was adorable. I was just adorable. And I remember speaking to my counselor there and saying, you know, I really don't need all this crap because all I have to do is remember what I've just been through. I hate pain. I hate needles. I hate, the whole experience was so bizarre. At one time during that week when I was supposedly resting, I got up and started wandering around the spaceship to try and find somebody. And I found out later that the nurse came to check my IVs or something, and there was nobody in my bed. And they followed me by following the dribble of blood from my IVs, because I had somehow pulled everything loose and was roaming through the hospital looking for my spirit guide. I've never shared that out loud to anybody. People are getting to me here. So, the new life, something totally new began. And it has taken me 28 years so far to simply accept what happened. And I've always been very annoyed with fundamentalists for appropriating the phrase born again, because it doesn't mean what I want it to mean when I say I was literally born again. And I am still going through the process of learning what that means. I am still going through the process of learning that I am no longer the person I was. I did, in fact, die and was reborn into the same body, yes, but not with any of the other similarities. I don't have, and this is not something I'm proud of, but it's simply the truth. I don't have a friend from across that barrier, from across that experience. I don't have a friend that knew me before that experience. My relationship with my family of origin is much calmer than it was, but it's not close, it's not intimate. Because I'm just not who, it's weird to go back to. I tried one high school reunion and I've gone back to my hometown a couple of times, and I know who they think I am and who they expect me to be, and sometimes I try to do that for them just to avoid, but I'm not that person. I'm not that person. I'm somebody else. I'm the same spiritual energy that I was then, but the choices that I'm making about how I express physically are very different. Since that time, I have a very close, amazingly casual relationship with those spirit guides. They are with me all the time. And here's a part of it that I also think is very important for us today to realize. We find it, even those of us who have had this experience, have a tendency, or who have brushed it in some way out of body experiences, or just that kind of divine intervention that cannot be called anything else. We tend to think that we are at the bottom of some order of spiritual exaltation. And what it's been very difficult for me to grasp and accept is that I am the cutting edge of this. They are my workers, my team. I wouldn't be here without them. But the choices and the creative work are mine to do. We are the cutting edge. The spiritual beings that support us, that surround us, that serve us, that try to help us get through this, do just that. They serve and support us. If we give our power away to them and believe that they are more powerful than we because they're not in bodies, then we're doing the same thing we did for generations after generation in giving all our power away to some distant concept of a God. Every attempt we make to give away our power slows down the process that we are here for. The process that we are here for is to claim our power and to create new possibilities with it. I do not go looking for psychics or for, astrologers or whatever, but when they come my way, when they are dropped in my lap, I assume that this is something Spirit is trying to tell me. And I have had some extraordinary experiences. One woman who's an astrologer from Calgary who comes through Portland once every 2 years for 2 days, and it just happened that somebody knew somebody and said, you've got to do, and arranged for me to see her, and I sent my information ahead of time so she could prepare a chart, and this would have been 1994, and I walked through the door, and she said, what the hell happened to you in October of '74? So I knew this was probably somebody I should listen to. And she said, you have gone through and are going through an amazing experience. You have gone through in advance what the world is going through and is going to go through. And the reason you came back is to help people know that there's something beyond it, not to despair. For several years, I focused on staying sober, trying to make my life work, and this whole experience went somewhere. I didn't acknowledge it. It isn't that I just didn't think of it. I never gave it a thought. But later, when I needed it, because after a year of recovery, I turned myself into yet another mental institution because I was so depressed and so suicidal. And it was New York Hospital, and they kept me for a while, but they said, there's nothing we can really do. And they sent me, I was just in New York in January, and I was taking a cab to the LaGuardia, and I drove past Manhattan State Hospital, which is on an island in the East River. And it's a big, ugly-looking building built in the 1920s, I think. And it is where they send the hopelessly insane to live out their lives until they die, the people who cannot be, the street people that cannot take care of themselves anymore. And it's just a big, haunted building with endless corridors and rooms where people shuffle and talk to themselves and don't relate. And that's where I ended up. That's where I spent my first anniversary in recovery, thinking this isn't quite what they promised me. And I saw a doctor there, a psychiatrist who saw me a couple of times and listened to me whine. And finally he said, I'm taking myself off your case. I'm not going to see you anymore. And I said, well. He said, you are an amazing man and one of the strongest, spiritually strongest people I've ever come across. And he said, I don't want to hear you talk about how weak you feel and how incapable you are and how suicidal. He said, you just survived a year without drinking on sheer willpower alone. That gives you some clue as to how desperately you want to be alive. You are going to live a long life. And if you want to live it here in paper slippers, eating with a spoon, that's your choice, but I will not be a part of it. And I thought, wow. Oh. So I pouted for a couple of days, but I went back. And I said, just if I were willing to consider the possibility that this isn't the end, that there's something more to my life, what would be my first step? And he said, I will get you a pass to go back to a 12-step meeting. And I said, oh, I tried that, it didn't work. He said, no, you didn't try it. You didn't try it at all. You tried to control it. You never let go of anything. So I did that. I got a pass, and you could walk across this footbridge across the East River and go to a meeting on the east side. And after a while, I was released, and I was on welfare. I was unemployable. I was on lithium. And they said, that's pretty much the life you have to expect, just a sort of half-life, and you have to come in for your lithium every week, and you have to see the doctor every now and then. You go to the welfare office every week. It was a full, rich life. And I was living in this tiny little furnished room on West 38th Street. I mean, you could touch it, both walls. And I started going to meetings in the village, and I would go to the meetings, and people would say, how are you? I'd say, oh, fine, I'm fine. Just great. And I'd, get back on the subway and come back to my little room and cry myself to sleep. And I do have a sense of drama in my life. I cannot deny that. But one Saturday night, it was the Saturday night of Easter weekend, of 1976. And I came back, and I did the one thing I had never done since my Catholic childhood. I got down on my knees, and I said, I don't know what's out there. I don't know who you are that has been following me this far. I don't know what's going on, but I just need someone to know that I cannot do this. I can't do it. I can't walk around acting like I'm in charge. I can't do this. And I went to sleep. And I woke up and I was still in that same room, and I opened my eyes and nothing in the world was the same. I opened my eyes and suddenly I felt hope and I felt possibility. And I felt I am not dragging myself through the final days of a failed life. I'm on the verge of doing something else. And that same day, that's Easter Sunday, was the first day I went to Unity. And the only reason I went to Unity was because I really had the hots for this guy in the program who had said to me Saturday night, you want to go to church with me on Sunday? Well, I would have gone anywhere with him on any day because I was so amazed that anybody wanted to go anywhere with me. So I met him and we went to hear Eric Butterworth talk. And it was my first exposure to any kind of spirituality out of the mainstream, which was Catholic, of course. Everything else is out of the mainstream if you're a Catholic. Baptists, Presbyterians, everything. And he talked about the Christ within each of us, and that Jesus didn't come to show off and be special. He came to awaken our awareness of our own power. And everything inside me exploded. It scared the shit out of me. And I fled, and I wouldn't go back. I didn't go back for 5 years because it was a cult, and they were trying to suck me in, and here I am today, so they obviously did a pretty good job of it. But I took Eric's book, Discover the Power Within You, and I cried over it, and I underlined it, and I wrote how true and things like that in the more. I did all those corny things you do when you find the answer and you don't quite know what to do with it. And step by step, things started to happen. Somebody stopped me at a meeting and said, I have a townhouse in the village and I'm going to be on Fire Island all summer and I don't want to leave it empty. Would you live in my 3-story townhouse with, and keep an eye on it for the summer? I said, oh, all right. I went to another doctor and he said, I don't believe in taking medication just because you're taking medication. Stop it. I said, I can't stop it. I'll go back to where I was. He said, I don't think so. If you do, we can put you back on it, but I don't think so. And I haven't been medicated from that day to this. He said, that doctor said, I don't think you're unemployable. Why don't you go get a job? Rude people. And since then, there is how can you connect? How can you connect who I am and what I'm doing today to where I was then? How can I begin to describe to you how totally dead I was? Whether my heart was still beating or not, that death certificate was perfectly, totally accurate. I was dead. And it was then that Spirit said, could you let us in a little bit now? Are you through trying to do it your way? Are you through trying to believe that there is no dimension to life other than what you're experiencing every day? Could you please let us have a little bit of working room here? And amazing things started to happen. Some of them painful, hasn't been, but you know what? That Spirit promise was absolutely right. It has never been that bad. Because no matter how painful, I have never again felt that total despair, that total belief that there is nothing to believe in, and especially there is nothing in me to believe in. Through the years, when I've needed a firm hand and guidance, it has been there. For a long time I thought, once I got back in touch with what had happened and remembered it, and I thought, okay, so where's what it is to do? At that time wherever I was, I lived in New York, then I moved to Detroit, and then I moved to Chicago. And it was in Chicago that I finally, everything was going fine in my life, and it felt so empty because I had lost touch with that dimension. And so I went back to unity and remembered and got back in touch with that power. And when I need it, it's there. It's absolutely there. And it's there more frequently now than it has ever been. I mean, my guides are there. My spiritual support is there. When I'm in a counseling session, I have very little to do except be there. And sometimes it's been very overt and clear. You know, I wasn't going to go to, it was Sarah Latoine, who many of you know, who said, I think you need to be a unity minister. I said, I think you need to have your head examined. You're demented. Well, just get down to Unity Village and take some classes. No. Well, okay, I'll go, but that's me, I'm going to be a minister. And I'd go down to Unity Village, and some of the leading lights, Ed Rabel would stop and say, well, did you apply to ministerial school? I'd say, I'm not going to be a minister, I'm just down here for... Everybody knew it but me, you know. And then, well, why don't you just write for the application? Well, okay, I'll write, but I'm not going to send it in. Okay, I'll send it in, but that doesn't mean that if I get accepted, which I'm sure I won't, that I'll go down for an interview. Well, okay, I did, and I will go down for an interview, but that doesn't mean I'm going. And that was my last step. I'm not going. I was accepted. I'm not going. I'm not going. I have a life here in Chicago. I have a life. I have friends. I have a career. I was directing then. I was busy. You know, I was even able to turn down work. I always thought that was the height of success in theater, is to be able to say no to a job that you hate, you know, because you don't have to do it. Within 2 days, the following things happened. I had 3 directing assignments lined up for the summer at can't remember the name of the huge summer theater outside Milwaukee. They went bankrupt, and they called and broke all my contracts. I got a knock on my door from the owner of my building saying, we've just sold the building, and you have to be out of your apartment in 30 days. You know, I thought, well, okay, you don't have to holler. It's like everything just shut down around me. So off I tooled to Unity Village. Spent the first year there, I didn't unpack because I wasn't going to stay. I hated it. I was so depressed. I didn't like it. And went out to Oregon and started my own ministry for a year, and then an existing. I was still working and doing medical transcription work. That was what paid my bills, because this was just my own ministry, and it met Sunday nights in theaters, and we did drummings and plays and poetry readings and weird things, and it was not definitely paying my salary. And then a suburban church outside Portland in Beaverton called and said, we're either going to close our, you know, it's nice. We're either going to close our doors, or you have to come and be our minister, you know, because we can't afford to have somebody come in, because we'd have to move them in, and we can't afford that. And we are only 30 people strong, and everybody's left because there was this huge fight. And so I took it, and in over 5 years, I built it up to about 300 people. And there was this message after a while that, okay, it's time to move on now. Move on to what? Well, you'll find that out. First, let go here. No, I don't want to let go here. Show me what's next, then I'll let go here. No, let go here, then we'll show you what's next. No, show me what's next. No. I mean, does anybody else play that game? It's just, you know, of course I'll let go. Just show me where I'm going to land, and I'll be so graceful about it, it'll be lovely. And the answer is always, let go. Jesus knew what he was saying when he said, oh, you faithless generation, asking for signs and miracles. You know, don't we always? Show me a sign, show me a miracle, show me, you know, prove to me that this is true, and then I'll believe. No, believe first. You know, believe because you know it to be true, and then the signs and miracles will take care of themselves. So I went down to, I have a close relationship with a group in California called the Institute for Heart Math. And Doc Childre, who's their founder, is a particular mentor of mine. And I went down and spent a weekend with him. And he said, Ed, you're ignoring some energy here. It's time for you to, you know, you've done what you can in Beaverton. It's time for you to take a step forward. And I said, no, I don't think so. Came back to Beaverton, and the following weekend I was speaking at Crystal Mountain, which is their ski resort in Washington. They do a retreat there every summer. So I went up on this mountaintop, and I woke up and I thought I was having a stroke, because my whole face felt numb. And I thought, take me now, Lord. I am not going to tell this mountain full of crazed healers that I'm having a stroke, because, you know, there'll be drums and pyramids and things around me. I will not do it. I will not do the drama. I would rather die, you know. I would rather die than get them all riled up about, oh, let's go heal Ed, let's go put a pyramid over his roof. And I thought, please, just take me quietly and let me go. So I didn't say anything to anybody. I tried to cover it up, and I got down the mountain and got to my doctor, and it wasn't a stroke, it was Bell's palsy. And this half of my face was paralyzed, and my mouth was drooping. I was adorable. And he said, there is nothing we can do about it. It lasts 3 to 6 months. It will go away, and until then, you live with it. And I went home. It was a Monday. I went home. I called my board president and said, I'm going to resign from the ministry. And why don't you come in tomorrow, and we'll talk about the details. Went to sleep that night, woke up. There was not a sign of Bell's palsy in my face. Not a trace. Not a bit. The guidance is there when I need it. And the guidance will be as severe as I need it to be before I'm willing to listen, I mean, a gentle nudge doesn't always work with me. I need to be pushed. So I truly was born again. I truly was born again in this near-death experience. I came back, I came back freed of a lot of the rubble. I think when they sent me back, they did some cleaning first, And it's taking me a long time to be willing for that to be true. I'm going through a lot of experiences now about getting in touch with the power I am and letting go of my built-in beliefs that because of my childhood or because of this or because of that, I'm limited in any way. I think the reason we go through these experiences is not to increase our dependence on a spiritual energy anywhere else, but to truly get in touch with the spiritual energy within us. And to truly know that this is part of an incredibly important process. And when I look at the world today, I see a world that is heading toward a near-death experience. And if that's what it takes, then that's what it takes. And our job is to hold the high watch and know through it all that a very great good, an unimaginably great good, is seeking to express. So I'm very careful in choosing where I put my peace energy, to make sure I'm not putting it someplace that makes it someone's fault, or that allocates blame, or that gets into battles of right and wrong, or good and bad, or shame. And I can't go there. I don't have the time. I wasted enough of my life with that, with those stupid ideas of whose fault it is. And, I used to sit and drink at bars and just think of how wonderful my life would have been if my parents had had the decency to be wealthy, or something, I don't know. It was always just, I think after this experience, my relationship to my spiritual self and my spiritual support has changed dramatically. And it's just get over yourself and get on with it, Nothing is anybody's fault. We are all doing the best we can. But what we must do is hold up the absolute truth that we are heading toward the freedom of heaven. We are heading toward a world of infinite possibility. We are not going to find it. We are not going to get there. We are going to create it if and when we get in touch with our own power. Because it is from within us that the kingdom of heaven, or as I choose to think of it, the freedom of heaven, will be created. Not by angels as a reward for us being good, not by Jesus around the corner when we get there. Jesus did his part. Get over it, he's through. He's waiting for the welcome to the kingdom party to start, and he's getting kind of bored. It is ours to do, and we must do it in love. We must do it, and maybe this is what the near-death is about. We must do it by letting go of all we've been taught about limitations, about who we are not, about who God is, about what God is not. We must know what we know and claim the power behind it and move forward and make the choices. We have to. We have to. We came here to do that. For a long time I thought, well, where's my great and wonderful thing to do if I'm going to be doing, if I'm here? And I got it one day that it may have happened. I may have smiled at somebody on a Chicago bus and turned her thoughts from suicide to hope without knowing it. We don't get to know necessarily. That was a shock to me. I'm a drama queen. I want to know. I want to see. I want a big scene. And here is Ed doing his great and wondrous work. I may have done it, and the rest of it is just coast along and play nice and don't get hurt, and we'll call you when we need you. I don't know. But we must go out into every day as if this is the day when the work we are here to do is going to happen. This is the day when the choice I came here to make, the choice that only I can make, is going to come up for me. This is the day. This is the choice, this one right in front of my face. This is the choice I came here and went through all of that to make. This is the choice. And if we do that, there's not a temporal power on this planet that can stand in the way of the kingdom. You know that. You know that about yourself. We must know it, and we must go into every day knowing it and into every choice knowing it. We must be the ones who create the kingdom. It's what we came here for. This has been a real privilege, and I really appreciate your listening and giving me a chance to talk about something that I have never publicly spoken about to this extent before. So, questions, discussion? Yes?
Being a unity person, I find it interesting that you never went off to Church of Religious Science or Christian Science. You kind of stayed with the Christian concept and the belief system.
That I stayed with the Christian concept. Yes, I did. I mean, my guidance was to unity. If that cute little guy had been going to religious science, I would probably be a religious science practitioner even as we speak. But my guidance was to unity. I have certainly explored other things since then. But part of if what we come here to do can be defined by what gives us joy, then nothing gives me greater joy than working with the Bible, working with the teachings of Jesus, showing them to people in a different way, being a bridge that brings people out of that locked way of seeing things and tells them you don't have to let go of everything, you just have to see it differently. That is more satisfying to me than saying, never mind the Bible, just leave it behind, we have some principles here you can work with. That's equally valid, but my work is to bridge the two, if that makes sense. In the back, yes?
Because I'm dealing with this question myself now, I'm going to ask you how you dealt with it. How do you put in your frame of thinking this experience with the spaceship and the space beings? How, in reality, does that sort of fit in? Because I'm trying to fit it in my own life, so it's a big question for me. How did you manage that?
For a long time, I just repressed it and thought, well, I was deranged and delusional, and if I mentioned it at all, it was as a joke. And some time ago, after I came back to Chicago as a minister here, I realized that was missing some dimensions of the experience. And now I simply don't. I mean, was there literally a spaceship? I have no idea. I don't think it matters because it wasn't happening on the physical plane. It wasn't happening. There was a spiritual spaceship. There was a place of rest I went that was not all the way to the light because that would have been more difficult for me to come back from in the fragile state that I was in. There was a way station where they kept me, and I was hoping that I would get to go on into the light and say goodbye, but I came back instead. I know that it exists spiritually. Could we locate it if we had radar beams up there? I have no idea. Probably not. So, don't try to justify the spiritual. I mean, don't try to assume that the spiritual can only be trusted if it correlates to the physical. I mean, it's just the opposite, isn't it? The physical can only be trusted if it correlates to the spiritual. The spiritual is the truth of who we are. The spiritual dimension is the truth of what's so. That is the ultimate reality that we all live in. That's the truth. Whether I could explain that to a rocket scientist or a NASA engineer today, probably not. That doesn't mean it wasn't true. Yes?
I just want to thank you very much for your powerful story. I'm a spiritual group of women in the city that I've learned such a value to what our stories do to empower other people. So to me, my response to you is that it's very empowering because I think it then invites any of us to get into our own personal story and understand the transformative places in our own lives.
Well,
I really appreciate.
and what you're speaking about, the power of story, is something that has become, a central theme in my ministry, however that expresses. I don't mean just Unity in Chicago, but in my personal ministry, is the power of story. Now, I mean, the reason I haven't told this before, this fully and this completely, is that when you're a minister on a Sunday morning, you have to be speaking to a very broad-based congregation, some of whom would get up and leave if I got into some of the woo-woo stuff, and some of whom would not, but I have to honor all of that. So this is an opportunity to talk to people who are at least open and are not, and non-judgmental about what they hear. Well, you may be judgmental. You may think I'm, full of it anyway, but at least you're more focused on what's so. And the power of story, if I may put in a brief plug, we're starting a new series a week from tomorrow at Unity in Chicago called What on Earth is the Kingdom of Heaven, and How Do I Get There From Here? And it's going to be a visioning process of creating a specific blueprint for what we mean when we talk about the Kingdom of Heaven in each of 7 areas of our lives, so that we can begin to consciously make the choices we need to make to get where we're going. It's enough already with the generalizations. We need to start getting specific because that's how we use our creative power most effectively. And every Wednesday of this 7-week series, we are going to come together to work on our stories. There's a man named Richard Gere, but no, not that one, who is a master at working with this material. There was a huge article on him in People magazine last year. He works all over the world, and it's just our incredible good fortune that he's based in Chicago and is congregating at the church and has committed himself to this process. And we will be sharing our stories so that we can begin to create a new story. Because if we keep telling the same story over and over again, we're just going to have the same experiences over and over again with different faces on them maybe, and this one will be a blonde and that one will be a redhead, but it's the same experience because it's the same story of what we're looking for and what we need and what we think we lack. So we're going to start telling new stories and coming together to create them, and it's just because of that. I mean, I think it's essential as we move into this spirit, and this year, I mean, we turned a corner as we stepped into 2003. I don't know why 2003, but I tell you that it's not just for me personally, but I know that we have turned a corner. There's a speed up happening. There's a tremendous amount of new energy coming onto the planet because we are here to allow that energy to work through us. And that's another reason why we have to be so clear, because the clearer we are, the more energy we can process, the more powerful our choices become, and the more energy we receive. And if we become blocked, then it just slows things up tremendously, and we start having health challenges, which a lot of people, I think, can relate to right now. Blockage kinds of health challenges, resistance kinds of things. Yes?
I'm curious, just looking at siblings, if they're the same or not growing up among your siblings, how many have stayed, say, with Catholicism or are similar to the path you're on?
Well, he was asking about siblings, how many of them have stayed with Catholicism, how many of them are sort of on this path, how many of them would share this, with how many of them would I share this experience? With one other. I have one sister that, most of my, let me put it this way, a number of my brothers and sisters are in 12-step recovery, and all of them should be. But I don't, for me, the guidance that I've been given for me is that there was no real spiritual connection between us. The fact that we were growing up in the same family, I mean, that was a very different experience for each one of us. Most of them have stayed fairly close to home and are living lives much closer to my parents' life than to where I am. You know, we love each other. They think I'm that sort of eccentric. I mean, I have one aunt who I think says the rosary for me on an hourly basis because she thinks I've been sucked into some cult. But by and large, I mean, they're happy for me. They see that, there was a time during my experience before that near-death experience when, I went for years without being in contact with my family at all. I was so angry and so shamed and so many things, I just couldn't deal with it. So it's come a long way, but they're not, the fact that they're siblings does not mean that they are intimate support for me on this journey or I for them. We have our own journeys to do. Connie.
I think you should share your Dalai Lama story with them.
Which one? Oh, thank you for reminding me. In 1999, as the minister at Chicago, I was invited to join a small group of people. There were about 65 of us. People like Gene Houston and Barbara Marx Hubbard and Mary Manon Morrissey and Howard Caesar, Michael Beckwith, to go to Dharamsala, India, to spend a week as guests of the Dalai Lama to discuss the coming new millennium. And it was obviously a life-enhancing experience beyond measure. And a very challenging time, because he had called us together to, basically he was trying to see, a lot of, I mentioned the more or less spiritual leaders, but there were a number of people from economics, from education, from, the quote, real, unquote, world. And I think what he was trying to see is if Eastern spiritual understanding and Western mindset could come together to sort of facilitate and expedite the energy of the new millennium. And the answer was no. He spoke to us at great length one day and then gave us assignments, and immediately it broke into, people were fighting for, I want to tell the Dalai Lama this and I want to tell the Dalai Lama that, and they had their own agendas, and they were not really, it was just very much more difficult than anybody realized to get over the Western mindset and to get into a space of true universal spiritual appreciation. And the last day we were to meet with him, we'd been meeting at the Norlink Institute, we were going to his home that day. We met in the morning, and we were wrangling about what to offer as our final proposal or our final ideas. And should this, and how can we know if we're going to meet again in 5 years? What sort of 5-year plan can we come up with? And somebody was passing around a piece of paper, and I happened to look at the date. And it was 25 years to the day from that near-death experience date. To the day. And I put up my hand, and I said, and I told them. I said, 25 years ago today, I was dead in a hospital. I had no money, I had no friends, I had no life, I had no health, I had nothing. And today I'm sitting on a mountaintop in India, about to go to the home of the Dalai Lama. Who here could have given me a 25-year plan that would have made that happen? And how dare we presume, when we're dealing in the spiritual realm, to do 5-year plans for what we expect? I said, let's talk about surrendering to the power. Well, there was just this silence, and somebody said, well, I think you have to share that with His Holiness. So I did. They called on me, and I stood before the Dalai Lama, and I told him the story of that transition, of who I had been, and what had happened, and that it was 25 years ago to the day, and there were just tears running down his face. And he just hugged me, And I thought, if I had to go through all those years of self-hatred and confusion and pain and anguish and fear, just to be there that moment, I'd do it all again. I'd do it again. But we don't, and that's the good news. We can let go of all that pain. We don't even have to root around in the past and figure out why it all didn't work or what made it not work. It doesn't matter anymore. That's not who we are anymore. That was all preparation. We did it well, we did it badly, we did it. We learned, we bumped our way, we made it. We're here, we're ready, and it's time. And none of that matters anymore. Yeah.
I had a near-death experience, but one thing I want to make an observation, because it was what you're saying is cutting into what I've been thinking you're talking the whole time. You're reminding me a lot of these things that you say about what's coming into the world coming up, and I get scared of all these things, and I see them too, blah, blah, blah. What I'm seeing from you is this love, this joy, this, yeah, okay, all this shit going on, but there's a love inside your heart, and it's at a deeper place, and that's the place that I'm seeing that we need to be, and it's not in this, not necessarily this physical stuff going on. There's a bigger thing happening here, and that's the excitement that I'm getting from what you're speaking. It's like when you just talk about the Dalai Lama, it's like Christ when they come to the garden, they go, okay, who are you? We're the soldiers. Who are you? I am. And once he said I am, that love was in his heart, and they all fall down. That's where we need to be. That's what I'm seeing from you.
And that the only thing we need is to be able to love. And that's absolutely true. And it sounds so Pollyanna, and it sounds so impractical. You know, I went home last night. We had a Black History event at the church, and I turned on the late news, and it was, you know, the terrorism level has gone up a color, and in Chicago they're doing this, and in New York they're doing that, and, you know, and this is happening and that is happening. And I thought, you know, I'm not going to turn this off and pretend it isn't happening, because that's not going to accomplish anything. But oh my God, I am not going to buy into the drama. We are all such drama queens, you know? We think the only way we get anywhere is through massive dramas and upheavals, and, you know, just send love. Just send love to the terrorists who think they have to act that way, that's the only way because I've been there. I know. I've been a terrorist in my own life. You know, I have wreaked havoc on my own life because I thought that's what I had to do. There are so many things, you know, beaming around. The one thing that we are doing at the church is there's a nationwide effort to light candles in the wind, put lighted candles in the windows Wednesdays from 7 to 10 p.m., you know. And you can say a candle in the window is not going to end the war, but the choice to light that candle for peace will end the war, you know. It's the lighting of the candle and the speaking forth of the truth that is really important. And so we're going to have candles in every window we can find for that. Lonnie, did you have anything?
I just wanted to add to the James Climate thing, what they plan to do when James gets a peace conference in Jerusalem is to somehow record the power of prayer, so that the rest of the world that you know is skeptical that there's a before and there's an after.
And proving it scientifically is worthwhile. You know, my friends at the Institute for Heart Math are very focused on scientifically proving the power of the heart. That there is an enormous power here that we have never understood. That this is meant to be the mainframe. The brain is a workstation. And when we try to make the brain the mainframe, it not only fries the brain, but it eliminates access to most of the power that we have. It's here. And all of that is wonderful and important, and it's also time for us to stop demanding proof, you know. It's Jesus again saying, you faithless generation, why do you need signs and wonders? I mean, the impatience with which he would perform his, you know, show us a miracle, show us a miracle. Aye. You know, enough already with the miracles. Believe and you will have miracles every time you turn around, but first you have to believe. Diane?
Familiar with the afterlife experiments by Gary Schwartz?
No.
This is a scientific book. The man is a scientist, I think at the University of Arizona, and they did experiments and everything, and he said basically the experiments are over. We have proven it. Now it's accepted. It's a very important book. It's called The Afterlife Experiments.
The Afterlife Experiments, Gary Schwartz. And that's absolutely true, you know. I mean, Doc at HeartMath, they were doing telepathic projection. You know, the phrase is escaping me at the moment. But, and they've never been able to prove it because they've been measuring brain waves. And Doc said, no, measure the heart. And they discovered that communication is effortless over astonishing distances. But the difference you see is in the heart vibrations, not in the head. The head is not involved in it. The heart is doing the work. Yeah?
This is for you. When a sparrow takes flight, the air does not know its weight.
Yes. Absolutely. When a sparrow takes flight, the air does not know its weight. Yeah.
Recent discoveries by the brain scientists have shown that the cells of the heart have integrons in them, just like the brains do.
Yes. And there are connections. The cells of the heart have integrins in them, just like the brain cells do, and there are connections that they're just beginning to discover between the two. That not all of the communication flows from brain to heart. Some of the communication flows the other. There's a lot of fascinating work being done to support that. Even as we create these physical forms, we are using our spiritual energy in more effective ways than we think. You know, it's amazing. And that's important, but it's also important that we not wait until the scientific community gives us permission to use the power we have. We know we have it. We don't have to. We can lovingly let them keep experimenting while we go and do the work that's ours to do. Yes?
Can you just talk a little bit more about the beings, you know, like how you said they're important to your life now as well?
They are important to my life now, and they're a crazy bunch. I don't know names all the time, and I know when they're with me. When I was in Oregon, I had a house with a hot tub in the backyard, you know, with amazingly tall fir trees all around it, and that was, you know, most days I would end up in the hot tub late at night, and that was when I communed with the spirits. And a lot of the times they listen to me bitch and moan, which is nice of them. I always come away with a reassurance, with a sense of, how can I say this? I mean, I don't want to sound arrogant, but what they mostly tell me is how enormously proud they are of me and how happy they are at what I'm doing, even though there have been times, I mean, even since ministry, there have been times when I've said, I don't know, I have no clue what I'm supposed to be doing. But since that Bell's palsy experience, you know, I can remember the following. Well, I took a year off because I had to let go without knowing. I couldn't keep that ministry until Chicago opened up and then take Chicago and leave there. Lots of people live their lives that way, and it's just really annoying. I can't do that. You know, so I resigned my church in Beaverton, and I wrote my book. And as I look back on it now, I, honest to God, cannot tell you how I supported myself that year. I had no income. I sold a house and moved into a small apartment and lived partly off, you know, the proceeds from the sale, but speaking engagements would come up, tithes would come in, things happened. I mean, whenever I needed to pay rent, the rent money was there, and I just didn't particularly worry about it. And then the first call came to come to Chicago. And having learned all of my lessons about accepting this guidance of spirit, I said no. You know, because the church was some of you know, was going through a really rough time then. Mike had been gone for several years by that point, and it had fallen into factionalism, and there was no money, and it was, you know, I thought, I just don't need. I mean, why would talk about out of the frying pan into the fire? Why would I have left Beaverton to take on even more? So I said no. The association called me, the Association of Unity Churches, and then they called again and said, you know, we really think, we're concerned about that church. It's important to have a strong center in Chicago, and it's really not in good shape, and we think you're the one who could do it. And I said no. And went off to do a workshop one weekend in Coeur d'Alene, and came back, and there was a message on my machine saying, Ed, the absolute deadline is Wednesday. All we need is for you to say, yes, you can submit my name. And so I thought, it was Sunday night, so I thought, well, I'll call her Monday morning, and let me just pray about it. And that night I woke up at 2 o'clock out of a dream so real I can still see it. And Mike Matoyne was showing me around the building and giving me this big ring of keys. And he wasn't, he was being sort of impatient and nasty about it. Like, it's yours, take it already, And so I woke up the next morning and called and said, okay, you can submit my name, and if I'm meant to be there, I guess I will. And since that time, and I can remember that February then sitting and staring at the phone, knowing the board had met the night before, and I was going to find out one way or another, and feeling totally at peace. I loved Portland, and I knew that if the message were to stay there, that something really interesting was going to come up, because I knew that I trusted. And I was intrigued by I love Unity in Chicago, and if truly I was to be the person that was to heal and to help, then I wanted to do that. But I felt totally at peace. And when the call came, I thought, that's interesting, that's good. And since then, it's the difference. My friend Alex, who has been a friend of mine for many, many years, since I was first in Chicago, and was out in Oregon, and part of my work out there in Beaverton, came to visit in Chicago and sat in on one service, and afterward he was just sobbing. And he said, you're in your right place. You're in your right place. And I've been able to relax since then, am I here forever? Who knows? I'm here until, another Bell's palsy or something. Yeah, don't have to.
Would the astrologer have been able to give you better guidance because of what her studies are?
Would the astrologer have been able to give me better guidance than she did? Mm-hmm. Oh, no, she gave me a lot of guidance. Okay. Yeah.
Free will.
Oh, yeah. And I don't, again, don't give your power away. If astrology tries to tell you that the power is in the stars, that's misguided. If astrology helps you get in touch with the power that's in yourself, that's useful. And I don't care, we are notorious at Unity in Chicago we have astrologers, we have tarot card readers available from time to time. And as long as the focus is on trying to help us get in touch with that, because all of us are being talked to all the time. When I work, I've done a lot of work with Neil Donald Walsh from his very early days. I spoke with him and introduced him at a couple of gatherings, and we're good friends. And I always say, I will only talk about your books if we keep it clear that you're simply showing us all how to have a conversation with God. You're not claiming that you are a special being because you had one, It's available to all of us. And anything that helps us get in touch with our own power is wonderful. But anything that encourages us to put our power somewhere else, especially now, has to be regarded with grave concern. Because we must claim our power. We must stop giving it away. It's easier to give it away. It's easier to say, well, it's in the stars, or my mother and father, if they had been, so because of my childhood, and my third grade teacher said to me once, I'm powerless over all of that. We must claim our power. It's easier to give it away and just let someone else tell us what to do. We must claim our power. Yes?
There is a passage in the scriptures that says, I come bold to the throne of grace to find peace and mercy and forgiveness for my sin. Whenever I say that, and then I yield to Him that cares for me, and I throw all my burdens at the feet of the cross, my mind is clear, my conscience is clear, and I'm able to receive guidance because I'm able to listen from my heart.
That's very useful, throwing your problems at the foot of the cross or whatever works for you, as long as you're not giving the power to the cross. And I'm going to say something that will upset some of you. Don't be giving your power to Jesus Christ. He doesn't want it. He doesn't want it. He didn't come here to make himself powerful over us. He came here to make us powerful over ourselves. And he does not want us sitting around saying, well, I'll wait and see what Jesus wants me to do here. Jesus wants us to make a couple of decisions and get on with it, Jesus Christ is as real to me as my other spirit guides. He is available to me. He is there. I have a personal, deep intense, loving, laughing relationship with Jesus Christ, especially when I'm doing my Bible work, especially when I'm working with the Gospels and I hear Jesus telling me what he was really trying to say as opposed to what sort of came out. Yes, that's very real to me. But he doesn't want my power. He doesn't want me to become an obedient slave doing what he says. He wants me to claim my own power so that I can become Ed the Christ, and we all can become the Christ in expression, and together we can create the new dimension. Yes?
Could you say a little bit more about what you refer to as you believe that we as a world are on the verge of a near-death experience?
Well, turn on CNN, you know. The point is, the question is, did I really have to go through all of that in order to come to this realization? Well, I did, because I was so distracted by the things of the world, by the shames of the world. And with me, it was not, I was distracted by sort of the good things of life, sex and I was distracted by feelings of shame and guilt and inadequacy and unworthiness that I am only now beginning to get in touch with and release. Only now. And I was so distracted that nothing else would get my attention. The question is, how deep into the illusion do we have to go before we realize that we can make another choice? I am not a pessimist. I do not believe the world is going to end. I do not believe that awful things are happening. I believe, and Jesus taught us constantly, it gets very bumpy. The closer you get to claiming your power and creating the new dimension, the bumpier it gets. And he tells us that this energy is not going to make nice and smooth all over the world. It is going to turn families against each other. It is going to turn parents against children. It is going to cause tremendous upheaval. This is not gentle, easy Sunday school stuff we're dealing with here. This is the creative power of God. And as we learn to work with it, and as we learn to correct the mistakes that we've made and the choices from the past that we wouldn't make again, it's going to get very bumpy. That's why it's so important that those of us who have had this personal experience hold to the light and hold to the love and know that all of this is happening for a spiritual good. And the more aware we are of that, and the more of us there are aware of that, the less painful the bottom will have to be that we hit before we start up. I'm very hopeful because the last Gulf War, I was in ministerial school for the last Gulf War, and the common wisdom was that if it ever started, it would be like Vietnam. It would just go on and on and on forever and ever. We'd be mired in there. We'd never get out. And after 20 days, enough of us said, no, this is not how we do things anymore. This doesn't work. This doesn't feel remotely right. We can't do war with the enthusiasm we've done it with in the past. We have grown in spiritual awareness. Now I think I think there is going to be a turnaround. I think there are possibilities that we don't even see right now that are going to express because enough of us are saying this doesn't feel right. And you don't have to be spiritually trained and deeply experienced to just say this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel right at all. And I think, and that's going to make, everything is consciousness, and that's going to make a difference. Yeah.
And on back to your out-of-body experience, when you've seen this sort of spaceship and beings, would that not have been the Holy Spirit?
Oh, I'm sure it was. I don't believe in, this is interesting because I don't ever talk about it, and yet it's absolutely crucial to my work. I don't believe in angels in the way that they're generally presented. I know that I am an expression of God, and that each of us is. And we are in human form for spiritual purposes. We are not human beings trying to become spiritual. We are spiritual beings bringing our spiritual energy into this human dimension. And there are other expressions of God, spiritual beings like us, who are not expressing in human form right now. Some of them have and may again, but right now they're not. Some of them haven't at all. We are all in this together. They are no less involved with it than we, but we are the ones doing the work. We are the ones in human form. They help us all they can with getting our spiritual awareness filled and getting our spiritual awareness focused so that our choices have power. But ultimately, we are the ones that have to hold firm and do the work. Yes?
How would you explain, I agree with your idea that we have power within us. And I have been sober through the 12 steps for almost 18 years. There seems to be possibly a contradiction between the idea of our own power and the first half of the first step of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know where I'm going?
I knew you were going to be trouble when you stood up. I said, that man is going to be trouble. Okay. He's asking about the first half of the first step, which is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol or over whatever. I mean, the 12 steps are used in a number of recovery programs. In all honesty, I have to say that I am not deeply involved in 12-step work right now. And I don't entirely agree with some of the fundamentalists. I mean, you can be a fundamentalist about anything. I don't like fundamentalists in unity. I don't like fundamentalists in 12-step work. The 12 steps were compiled by people who had no more than a few years sobriety. And they were speaking from that perspective. And it's an important perspective, and the work they did, I bless every day of my life. And please don't ever hear me saying anything negative about how the 12 steps, I mean, I wouldn't be here today without them. When I came back and had been born again and was a totally powerless, mewling infant and didn't know what to do, the 12 steps told me what to do. Go to meetings, stay clean, stay focused, and then work the steps when you're ready, and the path will open up for you, and it did. But the book says more will be revealed, and we don't stay in consciousness. That was 60, 70 years ago. So I believe that the part of me that died in that near-death experience was powerless over alcohol. I don't know if I am today. I choose not to drink today, not because I'm afraid that if I did, I would go back to being that helpless, hopeless, negative drunk that I was. Doc worked with me a great deal about this. He said, I don't care if you ever drink again, but you have got to stop being afraid. You must stop believing that anything has power over the truth of your spiritual being. So my physical form still reacts to alcohol badly. My spiritual being cannot be limited by any definition. It's because it's God. I don't believe God is an alcoholic. There have been times when I thought that was probably true. Not today. Does that answer the question? Or sidestep it gracefully, at least?
I agree with you, too, that the power is within us because I believe that God is within us. And I'm wondering, how do you balance that reclaiming the power and the concept of surrender?
Oh, surrender is about surrendering to that power within me. I don't surrender to a distant God. I don't surrender to a guide somewhere else. I surrender my fear-based, ego-based, whatever terms you want to use, my ego-based, fear-based constructs. I surrender that to the greater power within me. For me, it very often comes down to heart and head. There's no fear in my heart. The Christ is in my heart. I am not an alcoholic in my heart. In my head, I'm a mess. Most of the time still. And I still react to any new crisis by going to my head and thinking, why me? Oh, poor me. This is because it's my mother's fault, it's the Catholic Church, whatever it is. That's all up here. I surrender that to this energy here, to the spiritual energy within me. And there's another voice trying to express. So it's not out there, it's in here. Well, this has been wonderful. It's been very, very wonderful. I only hope that it's been as interesting or as helpful to any of you as it has been helpful to me. In your presence here, thank you very much. And thank you, Diane.
Blessings to you.
Oh, what a gift. One little key that I know there are a number of people here who aren't usually here because of that. There are now estimated to be more than 23 million near-death experiencers in the United States alone. That's over 10% of the population. I find them everywhere. I think the message of the near-death experience, it comes in many forms, and this was an extremely important one. I think every person who's had this experience or similar experiences, that it's happened for a reason, and that we have a message, and we have a knowledge, and we have a strength that is very important to remember at all times, and I think now more than ever. So I hope that you all will carry that with you and carry his message. Have a wonderful month, and come back next month and meet Cheryl from Seattle. Thanks.
If you think people, yeah?
Excellent. And I'll be in touch with you.
How many did you want? 3?
Thank you very much.
Well, not yet. I carry a lot of stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I
He's
can.
searching.
So what kind of
Helped me as a mom.
Right, thank you. That's wonderful to hear. And, you know, some people were horrified because they wanted the minister just sort of on a pedestal somewhere else. But it solidified my being there, you know, in some way. It's really empowering, but it is scary.
Yeah. And I appreciate you sharing about the heart and the head, because that's the workshop that I just gave. You know, that's the whole thing. And what I forget is that the whole is contained within. I still think of my focus under the whole.
And that's true too, but for right now, we must get in touch with
Yeah,
that.
it's that balance. It's really walking a shaky line. Thank you. You are something else.
My pleasure. Thanks very much.